Hello, everyone. I'm not sure if anyone can see me. I have connected the video at this point, and the recording has started. So I just wanted to say hello, everyone. This is the fifth in the series of webinars on talent management. If you've attended our previous events, you know that our focus is to bring clarity using evidence on trending HR topics. Second. Okay, so I'm Isabella. I'm a host for today, and the presenter for today is Dr. Matt Barney. Matt will talk about technological advancements that allow scaling leader development efforts. We're excited to have you present, Matt.
Great to be with you.
Thank you for being with us. And before we begin, here's a quick overview of the conferencing platform we use, Join Me. If at any point you cannot hear us, make sure you join our voice conferencing platform by phone or computer. On top of the Join Me window, you'll find a menu bar. Use the phone icon to connect by computer and also to change your audio, microphone, and volume settings. The callout icon is for the chat box. This is where you can type your questions or make comments during the webinar. We'll answer questions toward the end of the session, and please keep the chat box open, as this is where you can type your responses to the polls. And if you experience technical difficulties, you can send a message to HCG support, and our team member will be there to assist you. And finally, the person icon is to see participants, and this is where you can change your viewer name. If you wish to obtain certification credits, be sure to enter your name there. And if you're not familiar with Human Capital Growth, we are a boutique talent management firm, and our mission is to help organizations and employees thrive together. We help organizations achieve talent management excellence and leadership excellence, and we do so by putting the spotlight on the truth, as well as using insights from science, analytics, and empathy. And we have bases in the United States and India, and we're working with clients ranging from non-for-profit or entities to Fortune 500 organizations. And here you can see some of the clients that we work with. And here's the range of services we offer. Human Capital Growth is excited to share that we now offer a full portfolio of solutions for optimizing your talent management function. If you'd like more information, please reach out to us. We'll share our contact information at the end of this session.
This is Dina. Hey, I'm good.
Hello. So I can hear people are still joining. So I'd like to remind to mute your lines. That's going to be very helpful to improve the quality of the sound. And it's time to pass the presentation to Matt, who will speak about the newest advancements in the area of leader development. And Matt, I'll pass the mouse control to you right now.
I would do change role, department, all that stuff, and then just in the email make sure that you remind me that it's a transfer, and then I'll just write it on there.
So I think we have some technical difficulties. Hello, we can hear your sound. Please mute your lines for better sound quality.
So it's great to be with you. I'm pleased to talk about the new technology of leader development.
Okay.
And it's in the context of organizations around the world are spending lots of money on developing leaders, but the vast majority of them are not feeling that they are able to develop them sufficiently to scale. I think we're still having audio challenges there. And maybe we can mute everyone except me for the moment, and people can simply use the chat window if they want to ask a question. So the fact that vast majority of senior leaders are quite keen on improving leader development, it's timely to talk about what's new in both the science and the technology of leader development. And a lot of my ideas that I'm going to share with you today, I wrote about in a book in 2013. called Leading Value Creation that I wrote when I led the Infosys Leadership Institute globally. The goals for today's webinar is you'll leave with a better understanding of the latest science of both potential and performance around leadership. Those are a little different. It includes some new ideas around personality, not just the kind that doesn't change, but the kind that changes a little bit, as well as skills related to potential. And some of the new ideas around performance. How do you excite people with charisma, and how do you grow that charisma, the strategy formulation, the scanning of the environment in leaders. In addition to that new science, how do you make that science come alive for each unique individual right on their smartphone? How do you leverage some new innovations around artificial intelligence to mass personalize that development to many, many people around the world? And ultimately, how do we make the development of leaders much more accountable, much more embedded into their daily work, and scalable to people that traditionally can't afford the sort of senior leader coaching that I'm used to in my career? Let's start with typing in the chat window. What do you find most challenging about leader development? And I'll see if I can touch on those things that you find challenging as we talk today in this webinar. Please use the chat window and tell me what you find tough about developing leaders. Maybe people are a bit shy today because I'm certain that there's something challenging about developing leaders. I'll give you another moment. Measuring it over time. Excellent, Lorenzo. I agree with you. In fact, I am quite keen on, I work in this area of measurement, but the logistics of that tend to be challenging with developing leaders. And so some of the new technologies make that measurement, the psychometrics, much easier and more accountable to scale to many, many people. So you can get traction quarter on quarter and get those remeasurements. So thank you for having the courage, Lorenzo, to offer that. I think I agree with you on that one. I'm going to talk today, when I talk about the science, including the kinds of measurements Lorenzo's talking about, in terms of what I call the 4 Ps model. This includes the potential of the leader, the things between their ears that ultimately affect their performance, which in turn affects their ability to be promoted, their promotability, and ultimately derailers of leadership.
I'll white it out.
Isabella, if we could just mute everyone's line, that would be great. So the potential, the performance, the promotability, are the positive aspects of leadership. There's also the kind of pitfalls that ultimately cause leaders to lose their jobs or derail in some way. We're going to focus in this webinar on the first 2 of those 4 Ps, their potential and their performance and their new science. So the first around potential are the most evidence-based model of personality in the world is called the 5-factor model. It's much more evidence-based than the Myers-Briggs or the DISC or colors that you might be familiar with. These are things that across cultures consistently predict workplace behaviors, including, but not limited to, leadership. So their openness to experience is how curious they are intellectually, interested in visiting other cultures, thinking about completely different business models. And so in entrepreneurial and creative environments, this is a particularly important aspect of personality. Conscientiousness is an aspect of personality that is perhaps the best predictor of every job beyond cognitive ability. It's whether the person keeps their word, if they stay out of trouble, if they're self-disciplined. And you can imagine the kind of leaders we would all prefer to follow would keep their word and would follow through on commitments that they make. And that's the nature of conscientiousness. Extroversion is probably pretty well known to all of you. It's around the social aspects of our personality. And you might be surprised to hear, though, that the science around sales leadership, for example, is that neither introverts nor extroverts are the highest performers. It's actually the ambiverts who are in the middle of extroversion, who are both good at listening and at speaking and taking turns doing it. They neither listen nor speak too much. Agreeableness is the tendency to be easygoing, sensitive to other people's relational needs. And lastly, adjustment is how we all deal with stress. Sometimes people call this one neuroticism. So these are the big 5 factors of personality in the science. Now, the meta-analyses, these are the studies that summarize all the science in all the major peer-reviewed journals. They show that reputational approaches to measuring personality are 2 or 3 times more valid than self-reported based approaches, where you just ask the person directly about their personality. And if you think about it for a minute, it kind of makes sense that that should be the case. Other people see us all the time. They don't have they have an opportunity to take different camera angles on our behaviors, and it's tough for us to misrepresent or inadvertently have a self-perception bias about our own personality when it's other people rating us. The challenge with other people rating us is we've all had teachers that were tough graders. We've also had lenient graders, and the same thing is true for raters. So the approach we've done at both Infosys and in my current work is to measure that bias and remove it so that all the comparisons, the kind of comparisons over time that Lorenzo was talking about, are fair and comparable, even if somebody goes on maternity leave, even if a new person joins the team. Making sure the comparisons quarter on quarter are fair is key to making sure the technology enables this multi-source science of personality to its fullest. Another aspect of potential is not personality-based at all. It's entirely a skill. And there is more than 70 years of science around persuasion or ethical influence, around convincing people, educating people into your point of view by changing their attitudes and their beliefs that ultimately cause them to say yes, changing their behavior. There are 6 universal principles from Professor Robert Cialdini. He is a New York Times best-selling author and professor emeritus at Arizona State around the science of how to teach people to improve the odds of having others say yes to their requests in an entirely ethical way. Another aspect of potential that's emerging in the literature, it's not meta-analytically based, but it's exciting because it's beating other factors of potential, is the idea of grit, which is the passion and the perseverance for sustaining long-term goals in spite of the fact that there are road bumps and hiccups and other kinds of setbacks that get in our way. Those of you that live in developing countries, like my colleagues in India, I think they end up getting a higher level of grit than I got as a kid, because many times they grow up in situations where things don't work quite right. The power might go out, or there's some kind of accident on the road every day. People that grow up with those kind of hiccups and road bumps and are used to finessing them tend to be stronger in this. But the good news is those of us that didn't grow up in difficult situations can get better at this with practice. So those are some of the aspects that are new in potential between people's ears that may affect and improve the odds of them performing well as leaders. One of the most interesting and exciting aspects of the performance of leaders is their charisma, how inspirational and motivating those leaders are, like Martin Luther King Jr., or like Gandhi, or like Steve Jobs, or perhaps Elon Musk, or Oprah Winfrey. These are very charismatic leaders. And it turns out science from a friend of mine, John Antonakis, is very clear that when we help people tell stories more effectively, when they are able to use metaphors, when they use 3-part lists, when they use nonverbal behaviors and talk about the moral substance of their work, they're much more likely to inspire others, and others actually exert extraordinary effort to achieve collective goals. So charisma is a new aspect of performance that is developable. Another one is around scanning the environment, looking around at the competitive landscape for disruptive technologies, competitors that are disruptive, new government regulations, or even the weather that might affect the team or the organization, and bringing that in to the team and thinking about how to differentiate yourself and leverage opportunities as the environment changes or mitigate risks are a key component. So part of that environmental scanning includes the creation of new strategies, new approaches that differentiate the team, the product, the service in the marketplace in a way that's sustainable. And in my 2013 book, I talked about the best strategies are those that are rare, they're hard to get somewhere else, you can't substitute or mimic them in some way, but they produce incredible results for patients, for customers, for clients that they find useful more so than alternatives. And that's the essence of strategy formulation, which is a third aspect of a leader's performance. So far I've talked a bit about a leader's potential, skills, and personality between their ears. I've talked about how those may affect their performance in scanning the environment, inspiring or being charismatic, motivating their teams, and also formulating novel strategies that are very, very hard for competitors to mimic or emulate, but that are extremely valuable to the people that pay. Those are great, but what's crucial is making them come alive in a way that's scalable on a global internet, mobile, Internet of Things platform. And so some of the newer technologies that make that stuff come alive, that solve some of the problems, frankly, I had when I was at Infosys, are what I'm calling a time trial. A time trial is a way to deploy mobile computer adaptive assessments. These are very short assessments that measure the potential and performance that I just described, but they also have to apply artificially intelligent coaching on their job on specific days of the week, at least once a week, and they have to convince at least 10 stakeholders to both give them feedback and give them support. This idea, this technology, the artificial intelligence married to the computer adaptive measurements, was inspired by the Olympics. The picture I'm showing you on the screen here is a picture of the woman who has won the most gold medals of all Olympians in both genders in history. She is the current world record holder of the high jump for women, and she has beaten her own world record more than 24 times. Now think about what it took for her to beat a world record once. Think about what it took in her to practice to a level of beating it twice, let alone 24 times. Now it turns out Yelena Isinbayeva, the Russian high jumper here, she has sports psychologists, she has nutrition coaches, she has physiology coaches, but at the end of the day, she has to demonstrate to her Russian colleagues that she was able to get into the Russian team and then actually beat her own world record by her deliberately practicing. So our time trial is a technology to make the potential and the performance that I mentioned before, make the individual accountable for convincing stakeholders to rate them, to actually show that they're as serious as this Olympian at applying artificially intelligent coaching to their real work, and they journal about that through their mobile device. Most of the people using that today are using something like Siri, which is a voice-to-text technology on iPhones that allows them to take a moment and capture the lessons they learn from practice. The idea is, if I can find people who are very, very serious about practice, before I invest extra money in training and coaching, these individuals are very likely to take their career development as seriously as an Olympian. That's the time trial technology, and I'll go into it in a little more detail. Once we've found the people who are very serious and sincere about deliberate, concerted practice, another novel set of technologies is the use of mobile devices to provide both human expert support in between individual or group coaching, and for that coach to have a private window into that individual's journal about those lessons learned, so they can asynchronously push a mobile notification to each person, congratulating them, redirecting them, answering questions, providing different forms of support in the moment when the leader may need it, even in between coaching sessions. Now, one of the challenges I faced, maybe you do too, when I was at Infosys, is my team and I, when we would coach people, many times leaders would be sincere, they would commit to practicing certain things on their job, but they would forget to practice. And we wouldn't know that they'd forgotten until the next time we met with them. What this mobile technology allows us to do is, because they're accountable for applying artificially intelligent coaching to their job and journaling about it, the coach, the human coach, can see, did they do that when they promised to at their convenience? Are they doing it in a deep enough way to be meaningful? Or did they need a nudge? They fell off the wagon and they kind of forgot to practice. And can I nudge them on their mobile device, even if they're not at their computer, even if they're not checking their voicemails? Another novel form of this technology that I'll share with you is the use of what I'm calling clone coaching. So literally taking the verbatim coaching of an expert or well-respected leader. In this case, I'm showing you a picture of the CEO of LinkedIn. You can take his verbatim coaching or her verbatim coaching curated by the science of psychology and calibrating it just like we do an assessment instrument so that you can mass personalize what that individual leader would do if he or she were with you. Now, I thought of this only after I left Infosys because I used to work with famous leaders, like the founder of Infosys is considered very well respected globally. And if I could have done this at Infosys with his verbatim coaching, it would have inspired many, many thousands of people in the company, including the 50,000 young people that they hire every year, to scale a level of coaching that would just be impossible without this technology, and motivate them because it's someone they trust and respect, curated by the science. Let's take a moment. I'll tell you more about both the time trial and the artificially intelligent repeated measurements that Lorenzo's asking about, but I'd like to hear from you in the chat window. How do you select leaders for extra developmental investments to make sure that these are the right people who will take those investments seriously? Lorenzo was the brave one earlier. Is there someone else in addition to Lorenzo that would like to comment on this? Part of Lorenzo's question in my mindset is measuring leadership development over time has to start somewhere. And my proposal to you is to start early before they're selected into a developmental process or into the organization, and then use those as seed values to evaluate progress as the investments, the interventions improve. Feel free to continue to use the chat window if you want to ask me questions. I'm happy to keep track of that. Let me show you some screenshots of what happens in both the time trial as well as this artificially intelligent coaching with one of the user interfaces that we use at LeaderAmp. LeaderAmp is my company. It's an enterprise-ready, mobile-first application for both iOS and Android that scales leader development for both time trials and asynchronous as well as artificially intelligent coaching. It starts out with measurement, these computer adaptive assessments that are very short, calibrated for bias. It allows the individual to drill into and look at all their results. And we've used the science of influence to help interpret what the numbers mean, so the individual has a way to decide which area they wish to develop. Isabel, if there's a way to mute everyone's line, that would be great, so we don't have that background noise. The third, right within the app, the individuals commit to at least practicing once a week at exactly the moments that they prefer. So if you're a morning person, you can schedule small tweet-sized push notifications that are neither too hard nor too easy for you, but just right in your Goldilocks zone that you can apply on your job. And the idea is that you schedule these when it's convenient for you, you apply them to your real work, and you schedule a second push notification to journal about the lessons you've learned from practice. Now, the journal entry then is a unique window that each unique person has, that each unique coach has privately into whether the person is practicing at all, whether they're practicing deliberately, if they're struggling, if they're doing great, and they deserve a compliment to provide this asynchronous form of support. Then lastly, we have several user interfaces to help both the coach and the client see the entire history of that practice, both the artificially intelligent coaching, the coaching from the human coach, if there is one, as well as their journal entries, so that this doesn't get lost in spam or in voicemails. And there's a history that the person can review as they progress. We have used this historically with group coaching, where we had a private LinkedIn community with an expectation that peers are also needing to support individuals in group coaching in a private community. So the time trial makes sure that people who are really self-teaching, that are very serious, like an Olympian, are going to practice. We also want to encourage them to both seek out and help other people in that same cohort, in addition to the artificially intelligent and human coaching. So this peer support is another piece of their developmental environment that should improve their odds of development, and we certainly experience that in our earliest customers that use this. Let me show you a way to position this technology in science that's kind of fun. So some of you may play games, those games like World of Warcraft. I was inspired to create this called Leadercraft based on those kind of games. So a massively multiplayer real-world practice game. And the idea is that that game can position this deliberate practice with leaderboards every week and quarterly remeasurement of the sort that Lorenzo was asking me about to be kind of fun. So once you've selected people in the time trial, who's getting better every week because they're journaling properly? Every quarter, can we remeasure only the areas they've been working on? And are they growing to a level of having enough people ready for succession? So there's a whole bunch of new science that becomes possible with the repeated measurements called latent growth modeling. So this is a kind of talent analytics that allows us to make forecasts not only at the individual level, but more importantly, at the team and organizational levels to say, are my investments paying off every quarter to a level of having successors that are ready now? And do I have enough, or do I need to do more to invest more? Have I done enough? Maybe I don't need as much investment. So this is positioning the investment in leaders much more strategically and much more over time. In my past, when I was at Infosys, it was very hard to do this even once a year. We ended up doing it 12 to 18 months, remeasuring people. And we could show the founders of Infosys that people got better every 12 to 18 months. 86+% of them got better. But it was a big logistical nightmare. The technology, this computer adaptive assessments with holding individuals accountable for managing their own 360 logistics, is the way that we can get at what Lorenzo's asking me around remeasurement quarterly in a way that's scalable to literally millions of people. And it allows us to step back from that detail and look at the strategic implications of it, the forecasts, the integration with other career pathways to make sure that the investment in leaders is treated as appropriately as financial investments are. Another very exciting component to this game idea is people are going to be much more motivated to practice artificially intelligent coaching if, one, they're ambitious and gritty, but also if they feel like the advice is something worthwhile, if it's something they wouldn't get any other way. If I were trying to grow people to be talk show hosts, having Oprah Winfrey's verbatim coaching that's quite easy and simple for people just starting out and quite difficult and challenging for people that are very, very experienced or quite good, it would be extremely motivating because Oprah Winfrey is a brilliantly charismatic, credible leader, especially in talk shows and other domains. So insofar as you use this idea of clone coaching to capture expert leaders' guidance curated by science, like the kind of persuasion and grit that I was mentioning, you stand a very strong chance of exciting people to get at coaching they would never get from rock star level leaders, and applying it in a way and with content that is very meaningful because it's science-based. It's more likely to move the needle in repeated measurements of the kind Lorenzo was asking about. So this is a very novel use of artificial intelligence. It does not have some of the problems of natural language approaches. Traditional machine learning artificial intelligence does not work well for certain applications in human resources. In fact, there's a study done by Carnegie Mellon by a computer scientist showing that Bing outperforms Google in search when putting job ads up. The Google search engine actually spins up better jobs for the male profiles than the female profiles, even though everything about their qualifications are the same. The only thing that changes is gender. We don't have that problem with this form of AI because we calibrate these tweet-sized coaching just like we calibrate instruments, and we throw out anything that is biased against for any reason. So this is one of the more interesting, I think, useful ways to scale both the measurement and the coaching that's evidence-based. I'd like to ask you to take a moment in the chat window. How often, how frequently do your leaders practice deliberately on the job, either after training, before training, or during or after coaching? Unfortunately, not so often, right, Lorenzo? I think this is the big challenge. I think there's two reasons why, Lorenzo, it's not as often as we'd all like. One is some people are just not as gritty, as ambitious, as willing to do the difficult work of deliberate practice as others. I think there's a reason why Yelena Simbaeva is a rare leader in her field in high jump, that she's beaten her world record that much. She had to be brilliantly convinced that she wanted to practice all the time when no one was looking. So part of my solution to that, Lorenzo, is selecting people in a time trial who show you that they're going to practice before you spend a lot of money on them. And then once you've got them, once you've got people you know are sincere and genuine and have that intention to practice, stuff happens. They get sick, they forget, they get busy. How do you support them in a way that increases the odds that they actually practice in a genuine, deliberate way, in a way they can hold that's private, that's something they can trust, that's meaningful? So there's no substitute for the human relationship in coaching. But if the human relationship is established, having AI and human asynchronous coaching is one of those ways so technology can make that science come alive to improve the odds that they do practice more often. Anyone else would like to comment on how often your leaders practice deliberately? Is it less than you'd like? Okay, well, in short, what I've covered in this webinar is some new ideas around potential that includes personality. And personality is, by definition, harder to change. It's not impossible to improve a little bit. In fact, the AI coaching we use at LeaderAmp is calibrated using things that the clinical psychology literature has shown to be very, very effective, called cognitive behavioral therapy. And we've tweaked that to help people change how their dominant response is, or modulate their self-regulation, their self-leadership. Other things like grit actually have several techniques that have been shown in the science to actually improve potential. And persuasion has been studied by Professor Cialdini and others and shown to massively improve people's ability to ethically influence. So these areas of potential are all things that can be selected and developed in leaders. And I also talked about some new ideas around leader performance, both the charismatic, exciting, inspiring aspects by telling stories and talking about the moral content of people's work and the team's collective efforts, the scanning in the environment and the marketplace for new opportunities and threats, and bringing that in as a boundary spanner to strategize with others in a way that's very, very creative and useful, but tough for competitors to copy or mimic. So that content of potential and performance is crucial. The challenge, though, is making it scale, making it accountable, making it embedded in individual people's real work. And that's really where the technology comes in. This mobile devices are absolutely everywhere in the world. When I was in India, I was surprised to see even homeless people in India have Androids these days. So mobile devices, this artificial intelligence is a way to scale development of coaching that is brilliant, but very, very expensive. Traditionally, only very senior people could afford this kind of development, and it is worth it. It's just tough to make a case for even inexpensive coaches for mid-managers, let alone new hires that have potential. This technology makes that science of potential and performance possible to scale to millions of people with different levels of investment, both the individual of the sort I'm used to, but also group coaching of the kind that LeaderAmp's been doing, and even artificially intelligent coaching by itself. When it's gamified with the right environment around it and peer support, it too has potential to scale to literally millions and millions of people that would otherwise never have an opportunity to get that development, and do it in a way that makes the coaching accountable, makes it scalable and embedded into their practice. So I hope you've left with some fresh ideas, and I would be delighted to answer any questions, and especially Lorenzo, since you've been active, if this met your needs, or if you'd like me to go into something in more detail.
Well, thank you, Matt. It was very, very interesting. It was a great presentation. I really liked your evidence-based approach to it, and I think you covered most of it, but I think I'll definitely come back at you with some questions in the future.
Great. I look forward to it. Molto bene.
So thank you, Matt, for sharing the very important information regarding leader development and also how to use artificially intelligent technologies to help develop leaders. So before we go to the Q&A, I just wanted to do a quick reminder that if you're looking to earn a recertification credits, please replace your viewer ID with your name. So look for the person icon and then replace your viewer ID with your name. So now it's the question and answer portion of the presentation. If you'd like to ask Matt questions, he's going to be here for a little longer to answer your questions. And you can use a chat box to type your responses or questions, or you can just speak them.
I might have a question regarding you're speaking about latent growth modeling analytics, right?
Right.
And so if I understood well, is it something like if you manage to have, I don't know, different people tracked in your application, you're able to track their development over time and then to forecast if they're able to be promoted in time or during a certain period?
Great question. That's right. So there's a couple pieces to this. One is, what are your standards for declaring victory or sufficient proficiency as a leader before you'd be ready to declare that they're ready now? So one question is a measurement question of where's the bar for the different threshold. For, maybe it's a lower bar or different set of areas you look at for frontline leaders than you would for a CEO. You'd expect higher levels of charisma, for example, in a CEO than you would a frontline leader. So that's one piece. The other, with the latent growth modeling, it's also about you need enough data over time to say whether or not the person is not only there, but consistently above that threshold. One of our advisory board members is Professor David Day. He's Woodside Professor of Leadership and Management at the University of Western Australia in Perth. He's the world's expert on using these latent growth models for leader development. Now, what's brilliant about latent growth modeling is not only can we model individuals' progress and predict whether they're ready or soon to be favorable on those standards, but also the slope of that information itself can be useful in giving people coaching and feedback. So what happens if they've slid a little bit, or the slope isn't too steep, or they were doing great and they've stumbled, or they're accelerating at a much faster clip than most other people? latent growth modeling with at least three measurements allows you to make these determinations for both forecasting and growth or intervention purposes. So the reason it hasn't been used more is for exactly Lorenzo's point. You need at least 3 data points, 3 measurements, before you can make such a prediction with latent growth modeling. Because usually this is nonlinear, and you can only draw a line with two measurements. So longitudinal measurements in human resources is typically really, really hard to do, and so that's why you don't see too much of it. Part of the benefit of this technology and these very short remeasurements, only in the couple of areas they were working on, make it practical to have these longitudinal looks and make these longitudinal forecasts. And that's at the individual level. The most crucial element is at the organizational level. Do I have enough people growing fast enough for me to feel like my business strategy is de-risked? If you ask most board members, most risk subcommittees of boards, they will agree that leadership's a risk. They just don't know how to deal with it very well. We're giving them a very evidence-based way to look over time. And so the latent growth forecasting both gives them a sense for how many people are favorable on the standards for different job levels, and what else do they do to invest to de-risk it, or is it sufficient? Does this answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Was that Lorenzo again, or who was that speaking just now?
No, it was me. It was me. Yes.
Okay, grazie.
So if there are any other questions, please feel free to just speak them or type them in the chat box. We'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, so it seems there are no questions at this point. We'll stay a little bit longer after the end so that if you come up with a question, we'll definitely be able to answer. I just wanted to make some closing remarks before you leave. So if you enjoyed this session and if you may be interested in some of our other services, please feel free to schedule a free consultation with us. You can email us at info@humancapitalgrowth.com. And if you're interested in our webinar series, mark your calendars for our next webinar on June 16th. That webinar will be on people analytics and helping HR lead with intelligence. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I will be emailing the slides as well as the guide, as well as the recording of this presentation, so that if you'd like to review it, it's going to be available to you. And enjoy the rest of your day. And if anyone else wants to ask questions, we're going to stay here for another few minutes. Thank you.